So, Anese, we were sitting there chatting and we're just hitting record because this is going to be too fun. We want everybody to hear us connecting all the dots because hopefully people can connect the dots themselves. I've got, they can't see me, but I'm holding it up, your little press kit, and I see Paul Spiegelman and Bo Burlingham as quotes. Bo's been on the show twice. Paul's been on it once. Rob Dubay, who introduced us, has been on. So I'm hoping that this is meant to be, and I'm going to have a lot of fun. So you and I were just talking about the word intention and being purposeful, and Bo Burlingham's quote on his finished big book, which is literally the first domino that sent my entire journey into play back in 2014. His whole takeaway of people need to know who they are, what they want from their business, and why. Mm-hmm. That is the theme. And a lot of that ties into people need to understand about value, valuation, value growth, finance, blah, 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 blah. And here we are. Most of it stems from them. What do they want?
Yeah.
So here you are. You've got some solid meat that I think we can dive into. But for the listeners, let's just start back with how did you get into the work you're doing? Kind of give a brief overview of you, the books, the system, and then we can just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and first of all, I just want to say you're talking about three of my most favorite men in the entire world. I love that you just brought those guys up. We were saying this a little bit before we got on too. It's so much fun to me how all of us just end up coming together in really synchronous, serendipitous ways, I should say, and synchronous, I guess. So the work, the way I got into it. So the work that I do, it's called the IEP methodology. So IEP stands for intentional, energetic presence, which is about being intentional about how you show up. And it's how you show up for yourself, how you show up for the people that you're leading, how you show up for your organization, how you show up for your culture. Like we can go more and more into that, but basically it's just about being intentional about how you're showing up and how you're taking care of yourself.
So before we keep going, would you mind? I usually save this for the last question, Anese, but what does the word intentional mean for you? So because it's literally ingrained in your system, I'd love to set the groundwork.
So good. Oh, so good. So good. So intentional for me means saying what I want to create and then embodying that and holding that as a constant way of being in relationship with myself. So it's saying, here's what I want to create. And then that helps guide my actions, my thinking, my way that I show up, even my breathing. If I'm clear and connected to my intention, that helps create everything down the line. Doesn't mean I'm always going to get it, but it's very useful to be
like a true north, right? And it'd be interesting because when you're talking about leadership and culture, which you'll give some overview of the IEP. And I'm hoping some of the things we can dive into in this interview is, the awareness and the education is what allows people to create that vision. And I see a lot of times that there are people not necessarily understanding the possibilities. And so you've really dialed into leadership and culture. So I'll stop. Now I'll shut up and let you explain your background.
Yeah. Well, no. And I have a feeling, Ryan, you and I could probably sit here and talk for 8 hours, and just so we can go anywhere you want to go. That's fun and helpful. But I'll say that what I have found, and this is one of the things I love the most about this work, is that 70% of it is about the awareness. The other 30% is what you actually do with it. Because once you have the awareness that you're not creating the impact that you want, or your relationship isn't working out the way that you want it to be, or you're not creating the business results you want, as soon as you have the awareness that you're actually a part of that, now you have all the power to start shifting it. It's when we don't have awareness, we end up suffering and struggling and all that stuff because we don't know what's actually happening. As soon as we're clear, like, oh, I'm actually part of the problem. I can do something here. Now I have all the power in the world to start shifting it. So I started in this work. So I actually started working with athletes years and years and years ago as a kinesiologist. And I did athletic training and work with the athletes in the training rooms and get them ready to go out and play their games. And then when they got broken, I would wrap their ankles. And it was super fun. But long story short, decided I didn't want to wrap ankles for the rest of my life. Moved into clinical exercise and cardiac rehab. Moved into, worked in corporate America for a while, working in health prevention, preventive health services and injury prevention. Did that, really loved that. Went and worked in with Dr. Dean Ornish in reversing heart disease. So that was something that I did years and years ago. And then I had my baby. And once I had my baby, I decided that I never wanted to work again. Do you have kids?
I got twin girls that are 4.
Oh my gosh. So oh gosh, you're right in it.
Thank God daycare is still open at this moment. By the time this podcast goes out, who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? Oh my gosh, 4-year-olds. I've got 4-year-old nephew and niece. Anyway, I don't know if you guys went through anything like this, but when I had my first child, I had like this allergic reaction to ever doing anything again, except for just being with him all the time. And so I decided I was going to stay home. I was going to, fully lean into that. And long story short, after about a year of doing that, really, really realized that I missed my work, really missed being out there, really missed having impact. And so I sat in my Dodge Durango at the time while Jake took a nap in the back seat. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but now I see I was actually setting intentions for what I wanted to create. So I started looking at like, well, if I was going to work and get a job, at the time I was thinking of a job, if I was going to get a job that would be so fulfilling to me that it would be worth being away from him, what would I be doing? How would I be feeling? What experience would I have? And I started to craft this job description on all these Post-its. And by the time he woke up from his nap, I had crafted like this really beautiful job. There was no such thing as that beautiful job. So I created a company out of it.
So cool. It's so interesting. Just short story on that is for years before changing my introductions, I used to say, so tell me, how did you decide to become an entrepreneur? And 90% of the people were like, I didn't decide, it accidentally happened. And I was like, well, I'm not going to ask that question anymore. So very, very few people that I realized they found a market opportunity or problem, and then they all of a sudden rode that wave. So it's very interesting that you crafted it from the beginning. So you integrated the word intention. So what is the business that you have right now? Kind of give us a quick overview of the 2 books and then the methodology, and I'd love to peel it apart.
Sure. Well, the business is technically named Active Choices Incorporated, which nobody ever hears that name. You'll see that name on an invoice occasionally, but what people usually know it by is by the IEP method or by my name. And the business itself is basically, it's leadership development, it's cultural development, it's working with people around building their resiliency, navigating burnout and preventing it before we even get there, and then really looking at the impact of energy and how we show up in our, what is the actual impact of that and how much that actually costs us, which would be another huge conversation for you and I to have, right? Because the financial implications of people bringing negative energy to the workplace, of not bringing their best self, of not taking care of themselves, it's expensive. So my company focuses, I work with people privately, I do executive coaching, and then we train people in the methodology so that they help their leadership teams bring up their resiliency and all that good stuff that goes with it.
That's awesome. And you've got 2 books, right? Contagious Culture and Contagious You. And as I've was doing some of the research on you and the company and the process, a couple of the themes that I'd love to dive in as we kind of wrap around your methodology of this is that it's interesting as I've gone through the last 5 years of the podcast and then the business that we've created. It's so crazy. I never was a finance guy. We were talking about how intentions and culture and what you're doing and the finance are different parts of the same equation. And one big takeaway that I've seen, Anese, is that the moment that people realize that they're trapped, right? So they're stuck in this annual income solving for what they're doing every day, and they're not thinking about the value of the company and their options down the road. The moment they're out of energy and they're burnt out, you can lay down how you can make millions of dollars more by reinvesting, building out good cultures and systems and processes to create more value, and they can't mentally do it. So like I literally say when we're done with these presentations, I'm like, you can do anything you want. Like listen, private equity does this every day. They create millions of dollars of value, but they're thinking about it like an asset, where the moment that people run out of energy, the work that we show people they have to do, they don't want to do it anymore. It's truly almost impossible. Yep. And so they end up like the people that have been on the show or Bo Burlingham interviewed, it was like, yeah, I regretted it because I got burnt out. So I thought I had to sell. And that is like the opposite of what we want for everybody. So
that actually makes my heart hurt. And I feel tears in the back of my eyes thinking about that, like getting to that point. I didn't know that you saw that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me that you're seeing that directly. I see it more usually in a cultural leadership standpoint in terms of how that turns out with behaviors, but there's another example of the financial impact of it.
Well, people just don't realize I'm just so sick of this. I want out. And I'm like, well, you want out of your job or do you want out of the financial asset? and they've never thought about it in separate ways like that.
Right.
And well, technically it's really my job. I'm sick of the responsibility. I get toxic culture. I'm not passionate anymore. All the things that you talk about. And this is why I'm trying to set the stage here. If they can solve what you're talking about, I believe that people have the energy to execute. That's kind of that 70-30 thing you're talking about. So kind of laying the groundwork of, it's the individual who's the owner, but then it's their culture. And, if you hate coming to work, you're going to want to sell, but financially it could be a horrible decision, or the impact or the lack of impact that you could have if you stayed. So anyways, with that being said, maybe kind of giving it, you've got the 2 books. What's the theme of the 2 books? And then how does that relate, and kind of give an example? I know we can't see the pictures, but we've got, like the
oh wow,
little graphic you've got. So,
oh my gosh, I think you're all prepared. You printed things out.
Yeah, right.
So yes. So, and I just want to say, like, I've met those people, right? I can remember being at a big entrepreneurial conference years ago, and this guy had, like, a lot of times people here. So what we're about to talk about, a lot of times people, their first response is to go, that's the soft stuff. I don't have time to deal with that. Let's look at the finances. Let's look at the hard stuff,
Show me the money.
Show me the money. Show me the money. And the one that makes me insane is the comment, like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And so then they're totally burnt out. And I can remember having a really intimate conversation with somebody who, he had lost he'd burned out, he'd sold his business, he'd ruined his leadership team, he'd gotten a divorce, he'd done all this stuff. And he was like, if I would have just taken a moment, he goes, I wish I would have just taken a moment to think about what else I could have done proactively. But at that time I was so fried, it didn't matter anymore. And he let go of this really cool thing. So as you share that, that's bringing me back to, like, that was an Inc. conference years ago. So anyway, all right. So the Contagious Culture, that was the first book. That was in 2015. I wrote that book because I wanted to show people, a lot of times when I work with organizations, no matter what size they are, they think that culture is created by the executives of the company. Culture is created out there. And what really is true is that culture is created in here. Every single one of us is creating the culture, whether we're the owner of the company or whether we're the front desk person or we're the janitor. We're creating the culture of the company just by the way that we show up, the energy we're bringing to everything. And so I wrote that book to really help people build the bridge between pointing the finger outwards and thinking they don't have any power around culture, to actually pointing the finger back at themselves and seeing that as soon as I actually point the finger back at myself, I have all the power in the world to shift my culture. So in that book, I go into the IEP methodology. I took people through teaming, and there's a chapter in there called hiring and firing for the energetic good of all. Because as you and I both know, if you are bringing in the wrong people because you're so exhausted and you're not being intentional about it, then you're now further toxifying your culture, et cetera, et cetera. So Contagious Culture was really built to introduce the body of work to the world, and then also to help people really look at how do I create a healthier team and a healthier culture so I can create better financial results. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about that was, up until a couple of years ago, I didn't really worry about the financial side of it too much. Because I see you like fully smiling, right? Because I'm sure you've heard that from a million people. I'm a creative. I lead with my heart. I lead by intention. I lead by intuition. I care very much about having a financially healthy business and helping people have financially healthy businesses. But what I've always believed is that if you take care of the people and you take care of focusing and being intentional about the impact you want to create, the money and the finances take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree with you. I really do.
I totally agree with that. What I've also learned over the last, I would say, especially 5-6 years, is that you also really need to be having an intention around the financial aspect and linking and connecting the dots. So in 2015, when I wrote Contagious Culture, I didn't really go into the financial thing. It just was like, take care of your people, and I promise you,
you'll
the
make
money will take care of itself. I promise you.
That's a solid promise.
It's a promise. And we would see it, and people would report. They'd say, yeah, we're doing this. Our turnover is less. Our lost time is less, et cetera, et cetera. But then after Contagious Culture, I started to get all these questions. Like, I was in a lot of rooms. I was traveling a lot. I was speaking to a lot of different companies. And there were all these questions starting to look at, well, what's the financial impact really? And what's the science behind it? And I am really doing my work as a leader on my IEP, but what about all the people around me that aren't doing it, And so I remember having somebody come up to me after a keynote, and he literally came up and he patted me on the shoulder and he said, good job. And he's like, I'm really glad you talked to my team about this. This is super, super important. They really needed to have it. Do me a favor and send me the culture change list of how to change my culture. My team needs the stuff. I've already got this figured out. I just need a list. And he left. And the person, the people that I was talking to, when he walked away, they all looked at me and they said, oh my God, Anese, that's the guy we wanted you to get through to, because he's the one that he's the one that we keep working around, that we're quitting, that we're talking about, that is exhausting our teams, but he's the head of the company. We can't really do anything about him. We wish you could have gotten through to him better. And I went away from that event, and I remember driving to the airport. I was in that Uber or whatever, and going to the airport and just feeling so bummed, because I felt like I had not done a good enough job of really connecting the dots for him, even though some people, they're not going to want these dots, and that's totally fine. Like,
yeah, right. Like, this is a guy that could have done it, right? Like, yeah, he wasn't completely ignoring it.
No, completely. And that was also like another thing I had to really look at. It's like, it's not my responsibility to always connect the dots for everyone. However, in that conversation, I walked away and I was like, actually, we need to go deeper into this work and really connect the dots in a deeper way. So Contagious You got born after that, partially due to that experience. And then also really wanted to build a manual for people, basically to help them build their IEP more deeply, really get that they are the culture, learn how to navigate I call them the G's of the world. They used to be called Georges and Georgettes, because I had never met a George or Georgette in a room ever. And so those were always my pick on people. But since I wrote that book, now I keep meeting them. And so now I just call them the G's. But that book was really written to take the work deeper, help people build a stronger energetic field, learn how to really navigate the more toxic stuff in their companies. And then we did case studies, and we pulled financial numbers, and I did a lot of research. I worked with a neurobiologist and a therapist, and that book is loaded with like, here, you guys want the numbers?
For all the, on the fence people, whether this is real or not, this is your proof. Yep. Totally.
Yeah.
So before, because I want you to give the overview of the IEP and your methodology, but maybe before that, and maybe it's integrated into your answer of this, but what's your definition of culture? Like, is it, how do you quantify it? And you talk about, toxic culture versus not. Like, what is what is culture? What's a good culture? What's a bad culture? Maybe, and again, might be in your answer for the IEP.
Great. No, it's actually, let's hit it directly, because it's such an important question. So my definition of culture is basically the energy of the environment that you create for people to show up and do their best work or not. It's how do we feel when we get together? Do we feel big? Do we feel inspired? Do we feel loved? Do we feel seen? Do we feel cared about? Do we feel on purpose? And it's the energy and the emotion that gets created in the what is the energetic field of the organization. And it can be, your culture can be your family, it can be your best friends, it can be your team, it can be your entire organization, it could be you and your spouse. Like that, we're always creating culture.
There's a couple interesting things that I've resonated with over the years that help me further identify situations where someone says, so it's when you get off a conversation with someone on the phone, in work, whatever, do you feel excited and more energized or drained? And like, I literally started eliminating people from my life where I got off and I was like, that sucked. And then there was another way. One of my friends in our CEO peer group, he goes, pretend you can never, out of scale of 1 to 10, if you're rating the interaction, you can never rate it a 7 ever again. And so you have to rate it a 6 or an 8. And you're like, well, a 7's an easy out because it's always just lukewarm. And so then all of a sudden you're like, well, that was a 6. And you're like, what are you going to do about it? You're just like, but that, I guess my point of bringing that up is like, it's kind of a way to quantify that energy that you're talking about.
Oh my gosh, big time. I love that 6. I've never thought of that 6 and 8 thing. I love that. I love that.
It's brutal if you actually apply it.
Yeah, that's that. Ooh, I'm going to play with that one. I love that. I think to your point, like you walk away from a conversation, you feel exhausted. There's an entire chapter in Contagious You about that. And it's called OPPPE, which is other people's problems, projections, and contagious expectations. And I'm very well aware of the fact that OPPPE means something different on the song. And I purposely, I get it. But that's that chapter, but it talks about, like when your phone lights up and you see someone's caller ID coming up, if your heart sinks, you got a low vibration thing going on there. And there's either cleanup to do or elimination or whatever it might be. And my thing is always looking at what is the cleanup that needs to happen? If I've got relationships in my life, or if I keep seeing people show up on my calendar invites, and I'm like, oh man, Jack is in that meeting again, then that means I've got some energetic hygiene work to do around my relationship with Jack. And Jack might be the lowest vibration in the room. There's a thing that in the IEP work, which is called the lowest vibration in the room. And the lowest vibration in the room is the person who just seems like they're absolutely devoted to sucking the life out of the room. They're sitting there, they naysay everything. Their body language is exhausting. And by room, I'm saying, in actual physical presence, or even on screens. Like even now with all of us in this pandemic, we're on screens all the time. Well, it still is very applicable. In fact, even more so, because now you can see 20 people on the screen instead of in a meeting. At least you're not having to look at everyone directly
at the same time.
Now it's even more. Oh, Siri's talking to me. Now it's even more blatant, but the rule is that the lowest vibration in the room will win unless somebody is really good at holding their state. And once you've got awareness of this work, or once you've got awareness that your presence has impact, that's you now. Like you as leader, it's your responsibility to hold your state and see if you can help raise the lowest vibration in the room. And we've seen it, I'm sure you've been in those meetings where go in, we're all feeling great. You and I go in for a meeting, we're like, okay, we're going to get this done. We're going to get this done. And then we got, Jack in the corner over there, and he's just, Generally what will happen is you and I will start to, if we're not good at holding our space, we'll start to drop down and we'll start to meet Jack, right? And then we walk out of the room, we're like, wow, that meeting totally sucked. And we just created it. And then Jack's like, oh, see, I proved it. Meetings are terrible.
Yeah. Self-reinforcing. And there's this analogy that I heard years ago that said you can put a drop of milk into a gallon of gasoline, nothing happens. But if you put a drop of gasoline into a gallon of milk, the entire gallon of milk is spoiled.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, that's
I was just like, because there was this one person, because like when I got into the family business, it was extremely toxic, like real, like just and like we got to the point where we had this Zappos type culture, and God bless Tony Shea, who's now passed. But we had that culture, and we hired one person. You're like, oh my gosh, like you can't get rid of this person fast enough. So what's the let's dive in, because you've taken these analogies that I've got, and you've actually made a process around how to take stupid things that I'm saying and actually identify the real things that are going on.
Oh no, it's so good, because every time you tell a story, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. And anyway, okay. So, all right, the actual methodology, I'll tell you the methodology, and then we can look at whatever else works with this. There's 3 parts. So first of all, intentional energetic presence is being intentional about your energetic presence. It is also about being clear about your intentions and clear and clean about your intention. Because if your intention is clean, if it's in service of, if it is doing something good, then my belief is that intention is much more likely to happen. If your intention is not so clean, and there's like some manipulation in there and some like dark stuff going on, people feel it. So being clear and clean on your intention, taking really good care of your energy, which means your energy, your stamina, your well-being, your health, all that good stuff. And then there's being present, which is being present to the moment and also being really aware of how you're showing up with the people around you. So that's IEP. The actual method is just 3 parts. One is rebooting your presence in the moment. So at any moment you can just, wow, I'm in a really bad mood right now. I'm going to reboot. I'm going to come in and lead my team. Wow, this meeting is going really crappy right now. How am I contributing to that? Oh, you know what? Look at the face I got going on. I'm going to reboot. So there's rebooting your presence. There's a whole framework around that. The second part of the methodology is building a very strong energetic field and foundation. And we can talk more about that, because that goes into your relationships, your language, your self-care, like the dynamics of that. And then the third part of the methodology is creating a really intentional impact. It's just creating intentional impact. And there's a 5-step framework for that.
So what's super interesting about how you've systematized the ability to become aware of this, and that's, I don't even know if that's a phrase, but like you've got the ability to quantify this, because I've noticed that, and Pat and I, my partner, we've been struggling with some of our messaging, even though we've read the story brand, all this stuff. And it's about this, how do you identify and connect these dots for us? And the reason this relates is because I believe that a lot of business owners have a fairly decent vision of what they want with the future. And like, there was a gentleman from the Halftime Institute that said, Lloyd, he said, I don't know exactly what the future is going to look like, but I know what it's going to feel like. So he was more feeling. And then there's other people who I want $5 million and 20 million in revenue. So like somehow there's some sort of like combination of things that people can envision. And then they go along and they don't realize that they're missing the mark emotionally and financially. And I think that's kind of the two sides of this. And then what do you do about it? Right. And so there's this, then you kind of get exhausted with how far away you are from what you thought you could create. And that the reason I bring that up, because that's the third part of your system. You're talking about the impact. I think if you have this desire to make an impact, but you're missing the mark consistently, or you're constantly running in the struggle, it's going to lead more to burnout. So, I don't know if that's something with your deal where you can't go straight out to the outer ring because you haven't done the first work, or what?
Right. Oh, nice. Okay, great. Yeah. Yes. So, again, like 20 things I want to say to what you just said.
I can rally. You just look and lob them over.
That's so good. Okay. So, yes. So we just said the method, those three things. There's a model. So there's the method, and then there's the model. The model you're talking about with the three rings, basically in the center of the model, and people can go look at this. If you guys go to IEP.io, you can get downloads, a lot of free stuff that'll show you the model. It'll give you some tools, et cetera, et cetera. So just don't worry about trying to get.
It's in the show notes too, so we'll be good.
Perfect. Okay, so the model itself, it starts in the middle is you. And this is just the essential you. And the essential you is basically your purpose, your intention, your core values, because you and I both know how essential that is. It's you being able to hold your space. I call it bubbling up, so that I'm not getting sucked into everybody else's stuff. I'm not getting sucked into everybody else's energy, which is tricky, right? So that's you. In the center, it's you, 100% authentic. It's being who you are, not who everybody else is telling you that you should be. So that's essentially you. That is the most important part. It's right in the center of the model. The next layer out is your energy and your presence, which is the energy and stamina that you have. It's how you're showing up. It's your physical environment, like how you actually take care of your physical body, your environment. Everything in your environment has an impact. So your office, your screen. You, by the way, have a beautiful background on your screen. Like, I am actually so enjoying watching your background. Like, I actually feel calmed by your background. And we all know the experience of somebody's background. We're like, oh my gosh, is that your underwear hanging on the back door? Or it's just chaos. So
it's just small story to interject there. There was a gentleman. So I saw that you were a speaker at Inbound for HubSpot, and my wife is a marketing manager at a business, and she was participating in the virtual Inbound for HubSpot, and some guy who's a keynote, right? So this, I don't know how this relates, but he's the keynote. So probably speaking in front of 3,000 to 5,000 people, probably getting paid 5 to 25 grand, whatever it is. And I go up and she's in the kitchen over lunch, and I'm looking, and this guy is in his closet with all this shit everywhere. I was like, dude, would you have done this if it was the keynote? I don't understand how, and it just degrades everything that he's doing.
It does. And here's the thing that's so crazy about that, Ryan, is that so many times, we don't know until we know, right? So that guy, I don't know who that was. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Who knows what happened for him that was the situation. But if that was the situation, that's what he's doing normally. He's not going to know until he knows and has the awareness around, hey, wait, what is my background? And what is the tone I'm actually setting for the people that are watching me on screen? And it's the same with our teams. I've got an article right now I'm working on, which is basically, do you exhaust your team before you even say hello on screen? And the exhaustion is I get on screen and I'm watching again, I've got 8 people, 10 people, 20 people, 500 people, whatever on screen. I already have to process all that now, which is taking up a ton more mental capacity and bandwidth. And so now if I'm looking, I've got people eating and they're not paying attention and then they're looking on their phones, now I can see everybody. And so if I'm leading my meeting, I have a responsibility, one, to make sure that my background and the way that I'm personally showing up is going to be life-giving on screen. And then as the leader of the team, I also have the responsibility, and I think of it as responsibility, meaning able to respond versus taking care of everyone. I also have the responsibility to make agreements with my team of hey guys, what do we want our impact to be in a room together? Mm-hmm. We can proactively go through, you can proactively go through the entire model and the entire methodology and create agreements with your team saying, all right, how do I want to create so it feels really, really good to be together, and
Right.
it takes 2 seconds. It's just awareness.
Yep.
So back to, so that first quadrant, in energy and presence, it's really looking at your physical and your mental, or your physical and your environmental energy. It's looking at your thinking, because our thinking completely is either adding to or detracting from our energetic field. My language, if I'm walking around saying a lot of like, I'm going to try, I hope, I'm trying, I'm hoping, like that is contracted
I
language.
won't, it's not possible. All
It's
that.
not possible. But I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Like these are exhausting words. And so you want to like look at, is your language setting you up, so like instead of busy, maybe you're saying you're richly scheduled or on purpose or, well used. Instead of try, you're saying I intend or I will or whatever. So that, it's everything in your mental and emotional energy. Then you're looking at your vibrational energy, which is actually the energy that you're putting out to the rest of the world, how you're actually showing up, which I feel like we've talked about. And then your relational dynamics. If you are surrounding yourself with people who are low vibe, who complain all the time, who don't take care of themselves, who think your culture sucks, then that you'll start to match that. That's the lowest vibration. So you really want to be conscious and intentional about your relationships and who you surround yourself with. So that's that level that you saw, that's energy and presence. And then here's the thing. If you've got essential you and your energy and your presence clean and clear, because that energy presence circle also really supports your essential you and helping you hold your space. The cleaner my diet is, the more I'm taking care of my body, the cleaner my thinking is, the better my relationships are, the more able I'm going to be able to hold my own space and not get totally bombarded by all the negative energy that's out there. And that to me is a responsibility as a leader. So that third level out then looks at the skills. The skills is where most people want to start. They want to start with communication. They want to start with leadership development. They want to start with feedback skills. That stuff's a piece of cake if you have those inner circles right. But when you start with skills and you don't have the inner circles right, I don't care how brilliant you are. If you're making people feel, if you're leaving dead bodies everywhere you go and you are exhausted, it doesn't matter. And then you have your impact.
And I want to, the quick short story, and then I want to hear your how you would respond if I wanted to jump right to that third level of the skills. But quick I think a relatable example is like Simon Sinek's new book, The Infinite Game. I think it was his book. It was either his or Brene Brown's. There's a lot of these common themes that are going out there about being, going and having clear conversations. And a lot of the stuff you're talking about, they talked about even the highest skilled, I think it was either the Navy SEALs or some ridiculous, high performers. They won't hire or bring on the most skilled if the person essentially sucks. It was an asshole.
Yeah.
Because they just won't do it, because it's about that group cohesiveness and that flow between everybody, that they would rather take someone that is a hard worker and, pretty much at the top of their game versus otherwise. So you can't go straight to that skill set, to your point.
Yeah, you can't. No, you can't. It's funny that you mentioned earlier, like the outer area, the most outer part of the model is impact, what you want your impact to be. And everybody listening to this right now can relate to, can see probably 100 places where you've seen this in the last month. So the impact people will often say to me is, I'll go, okay, Anese, we want to have a really good culture, and I want to be a really good leader. Like, this is the impact I want. I want a culture of leadership and accountability. Great. So then they go, so the way we're going to do that is we're going to have really good leadership skills, and we're going to make sure we hire only people with awesome credentials. Okay. So okay, great. So that's your strategy. Our impact, we want to have, great culture, great leadership. So we're going to make sure we're going to put everyone through killer kick butt leadership training. Okay. That's all on the outside circle of the model. It's all on the outside. It's the skills. That outside circle is skills and competencies. So you're great. You're going to go train all your people. You're going to train them in this feedback model, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll say, well, great. Love it. Love it that you're looking at that.
Thumbs up.
Love it. Like double thumbs up that you're looking at impact and what you want to create. Love it that you're willing to really put people through leadership development and everything. Can we talk about the essential you, and also making sure that people are really bringing themselves and taking care of their energy and their presence and how they're showing up? Like, let's talk about that. 9 times out of 10, not so much anymore. Like over the last couple of years, especially since I wrote the book, I don't get this as much. However, it still happens. 9 times out of 10, people will go, yeah, that's the soft stuff. That's the soft stuff. We got to focus on the outside rings. So here's what ends up happening on the outside rings. If you're just focusing on feedback, I want everyone just to think about somebody who's really good. Maybe they've got their, I don't know, they got their MBA and their PhD and like all this stuff, and they're really good. They've been trained with the best feedback and leadership models in the world. And they come and they give you your feedback. However, they're not present. They're scattered. They're looking at their phone. You can feel that they're busy. Maybe you can feel that they're kind of judging you a little bit because they think that they're frustrated. They got to give you this feedback again. You know, I don't know. You can name like a million things. Or they're just totally exhausted and they're telling you how busy they are. And so they give you this great feedback and they've got all these credentials, but you walk away from that conversation and you feel smaller. You don't feel seen. You don't feel cared about, and you feel exhausted for that conversation. I don't care how awesome that person's leadership prowess is or their credentials or the training they just went through. If they're not paying attention to how they're showing up and they're not taking care of themselves and they're not intentional about the impact they actually want to have on that human being, they've just lost a ton of opportunity and potentially made things even worse than if they just done nothing at all.
Well, yes, so agree. And that goes back to you. I mean, I don't care how awesome you are at a skill. If you're still a jerk, you're just that, a jerk. and to make it less abrasive, like I think another interesting example that I've personally been, and I know a lot of people struggle with it, is if you're a business owner listening in and you're this individual and you don't know it.
Yeah.
And you say, and I think what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs who are first-time founders aren't in the private equity backed or VC world where they're immediately trying to build something to sell. This is someone that was a good craftsman, or, they really built something crazy, whether it's, a couple million or a couple $100 million, right. It's their baby, right? Kind of the Bo Burlingham theme of this. They've kind of done it already. When I say done it, they're the entrepreneur that started, it grew, it survived up against all odds, all the people. Right. So then it might not be an MBA or a PhD, but it's experience. This is my business. This is my baby. So you can, whatever. They truly do not have to listen to their employees. I'm not saying that everybody that's listening in thinks that way, but how do you tap through to that and say, this is the opportunity you're missing? So it's without, it's a tough deal. And this is soft stuff, but it's super real. Like, you can walk in and every single time I walk out of a business on our coaching and CFO business, the potential is based on the leader. Like, I'm just like, they're right for private equity because they can't take it to the next level. Like, it's true. You know what I mean? Like, it's just truly that leader has hit their top threshold. And there was a woman, Allie Taylor, who I should introduce you to, wrote, do you know Allie from Orange Kiwi? She's integrated with Bo Burlingham. And she did her PhD on the psychological makeup of business owners. And she said that there's a direct correlation with relinquishing control and the size of the business.
Interesting.
So that's a lot to you, but I just, the people that are like in that situation where they have to have that hard self-reflection.
Yeah.
Because there's science that says if you do this, there's a huge upside.
There is. So, all right. So there's, so delicious. It's so good. Like my mouth is literally watering. Okay. So the original question was, so that person doesn't know that they're them and they're just there.
It's like the school of hard knocks where it's like, even that individual might even look down at someone that's got an MBA or PhD because they're like, I've done it already. You know what I mean? So there's this whole.
Right. Okay, great. All right. So I see this all the time. I remember somebody once telling me that they would not spend a penny to do any of the work that we're talking about because they had created a fantastic company that was on the Inc. 500 list. And that the way that they had gotten to where they were at was they would throw phones at their people and their people were scared of them. And that's how they led. And it was working for them. That company, a year later, I don't know where they went, but I couldn't find them anywhere. But that was the mindset. The person was like, we have grown so much. We're totally rocking it out of the park. What are you going to get? And I remember him saying to me, are you going to get me to stop throwing phones at my people? And I said, do you want to stop throwing phones at your people? And he goes, no, it totally works for me. I said, then I'm super not going to get you to stop throwing phones at your people.
Keep doing it. Go for it, man.
So like, there's that extreme, right? Then there's the other extreme, which I tend to think that 95% of the people walking around that are that person who just don't know. Mm-hmm. And they're so exhausted, Ryan, or they're so focused, like they just don't know. It's just, they just don't know yet. And so I have what I call the 5 magic questions, which for somebody who's like, I don't think this is for me, or I'm not sure, or I've gotten to this certain point, I'll ask these 5 questions. And the first question is, are you having the impact that you want to have? And I just have them do a gut check, like yes or no, you know? The next question is, do you feel the way you want to feel? And that's a really important one. Like, and I'll tell them, you don't have to tell me, but this is just for you. Like, I'm not attached. My agenda is people do what they want to do. Like, I've got a clear intention for what I'm doing in the world, but I'm not attached to anybody doing, like, I'm not attached. So, are you having the impact you want to have? Do you feel the way you want to feel? And it's a yes or no, right? Like, we know, we just gut check, yes or no. Third question, do people follow you because they want to or because they have to?
That's beautiful.
Okay. And then I'll add to that. And oh, by the way, do they work with you and stay married to you or in relationship with you because they want to or have to? That's a big one. The marriage one is a really interesting one. If people really, I've had a lot of times where people have been like, no, my team likes me. And I'll be like, well, what about your spouse? And just thinking about that will sometimes shine a little bit of a light around, okay, wait a minute, hold on. How am I actually showing up? The fourth question is, what kind of a culture are you personally creating? So for that leader, are you creating a culture that is inspired? People feel safe. They want to come take risks. They're willing to give you 110%. They're giving you their best thinking. Or are you creating a culture that's actually really careful? It's just kind of like doing the minimal thing possible because they can feel your resistance. Like, what kind of a culture are you personally creating? And then the last question is, how are you living? And are you living in alignment with your core values? Those 5 questions, I have not met anybody who honestly can get through all 5 of those questions and be like, yep, got no work to do here. Because in those 5 questions, if you answer those honestly, then there is something in the IEP work for you and looking at your intentionality, the way you're taking care of yourself, the way you're showing up, your level of presence, and the culture that you're creating, if you answer honestly. So that's often what we'll do. And then real quick, if that doesn't work, then I whip out all my numbers. Because I got numbers, like billions and billions of dollars are spent every year in lost productivity due to low engagement because of the things we're talking about right now. Billions, $483 to $605 billion was lost in the United States in 2016 due to actively disengaged employees. In 2016, actively disengaged employees only made up 16% of the workforce. 51% of them were disengaged. Okay, that's not good. And only 33% were engaged. So, I mean, like, if you do the math there and transfer that over, and then you can look at your loss. I mean, there's a million ways you can, there's a million.
In the specific story, Daniel Pink's book, God, what the hell? Drive. I read it a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
There's something that resonated with me when he was talking about, as I was helping kind of turn around the culture of the old family businesses. What are your employees thinking about while they're in the shower?
Yeah.
And they talked about 20% of Google's engineers' time were free time to develop whatever they want. Gmail was created in someone's free time.
Yeah.
And you just go, okay, like, just and if you boil, like, going back to your numbers, if you're the greediest person on the planet, you still should do this, right? Like, why would you want, if you have one employee or thousands, why would you want 1,000 people figuring out how to do the least amount of work possible? Like, I just don't understand, like,
oh my gosh, or how to work around you.
Right.
Or how to work around you, or how to, like, do you want those people, that 20% of the time, the shower thing, like, amazing. Gmail got created in the shower. Okay, awesome. Do you want your people thinking about innovative ideas and how to do better in the company? Or do you want them going home to their spouse, pouring a big old glass of wine and going, you would not believe my day right now, and not being able to sleep? Which just, like, there's an exercise that we do, and this is fun. Like, there's an exercise we do when we do these sessions, and we just say, okay, just take your average billable rate for every employee on your team. All right. So let's just say we've got a team of 8 people. We're going to get together for a meeting. It's an hour and let's just say it's an hour meeting. And imagine you've got 1 hour. What's the equation? I forget the equation exactly, but basically it's like, take an hour a day that you're wasting with low energy in your organization, or that person you got to work around, or somebody who's just sucking the life out of the room, and it's a not productive meeting. 1 hour. Okay, which is super conservative. This hour includes the time meeting. This hour includes the time that you're going and gossiping about it and talking about how horrible your boss is and how terrible the culture is. This hour includes, like, right, you follow me through. Then we're not even talking about going home, being exhausted, not sleeping, coming back the next day because you're tired, blah, blah, blah. Now imagine that everyone on your team bills out average $100 an hour. Then imagine that you give everyone 4 weeks of vacation. So it's 48 weeks a year that they're working. If you net that out, it's like almost $300,000 that it's costing you for that one yucky hour, which I promise you it's way more. So you can have a lot of fun with this, really looking at what is this actually costing me. So like to your point, if you're this selfish or whatever, greediest, selfish, whatever,
yeah.
right?
So if you're the greediest person on the planet, this is exactly what you should do still. It's the same. It's kind of the whole conscious capitalism kick we've been on for years. It's like, even if you're the greediest person ever, this is the right thing to do, right? Like in the world of information, people are going to find out, interesting I was part of Vistage CEO peer group, and I was like 8 years ago or more when there was an exercise kind of around this topic, but not as much research had been done at that point. They said, what if you called all of your employees' spouses? What would they say about you? And I'm like, whoa. Yeah.
There's a cultural assessment in contagious culture, and we're actually working on a new one right now, but there's a cultural assessment, and one of the things it says in there is like, what do you want? What are your employees saying about you at the dinner table? Mm-hmm. What are they saying to the people that say, hey, I want to get a job at your company? Like what there's so many different ways to be looking at this. I think, to your point, I'm just thinking about an organization who I remember they had 2 people in the company that they were like, oh man, this people are really low vibe, but I think we can work with them. And so they let them stay at the company for an extra, I think it was like 9 months. And by the end of the 9 months, they ended up having to let them go. But in the process of doing that, they lost the trust of all the rest of the people that worked for them because they couldn't believe they were tolerating that kind of behavior. Talk about the gasoline in the milk, like it got totally poisoned. And that company is still doing so much cleanup because of those 2 people that they didn't want to let go, right? And that they just tolerate that kind of behavior.
There was never once, and I have fired a lot of people, and there were a lot of people by that time in my mid-20s, and there was never one time, because every time I was like, son of a bitch, I'm going to fire this person. It's my project manager that I got to, all that stuff that goes through your head. You wait, and then the pain gets so great that then you do it. But then my employees, who I thought I was protecting for workload wise, came over and said, finally, you did it. I will gladly take on 30% more work to eliminate that person.
Big time. And so it's so funny because you and I think, can tell like a billion stories like this. And one of the things I'm feeling hungry to do right now is for all the people listening, like, so what do you actually do about it then?
That's so great. Thank you for doing that for me.
Can we do that? No, because honestly, like I want to talk more about all this, and I'm also aware like we can only have so much time together right now. So just first of all, just noticing it, like just noticing what you're tolerating in your organization from people around you. But here's the magic place, from yourself. Because this is never about, like, if I've got an energetic issue on my team, and you got to understand, like, you're talking to a woman who I believe that if there are people on my team that have got really low energy and they're sending out invoices or they're sending out emails, energy gets translated in emails. So if I'm not in a good space, like if I'm not in a good space, if I know that my energetic hygiene is not clean, it is my job to get myself into a good place. And if I can't, I have sent notes to my team saying, I'm not fit to lead today. I'm going to take the afternoon off and go do some energetic hygiene and really clean my stuff up so I can come back really clean tomorrow. And that's an agreement that we have in our company. We actually have a core value, which is called energetic hygiene. It's
real. It's so it's so interesting. And I don't know, since you've been doing your work over the years, like the brain science now. So like, even if like 10 years ago, people were like, oh, bullshit, just get up and work hard 9 to 5, manufacturing, Ford, supply, but now it's like, okay, like in the knowledge world, Peter Drucker was decades ahead of his time when he's saying like, now the most productive, the most successful people have the ability to manage themselves. Absolutely. And it's truly like, it's a thing. I mean, they've got enough science out there.
It's so true. And have you noticed, like, I'll notice if I'm not in the right state and I just get in there and get it done and hustle and push through and I just muscle through it, my work product, my outcome, my creativity, like, it's crap. If I say, okay, Anese, not like, you got to go get a workout in, you got to go take a nap, you got to go lay on your floor for 10 minutes. I don't care what you do, but you got to shift state. What I get done in a third of the period of time and how much better it is and how much more clear that work comes across, it's so much better. So it's worth, so where we started was like, notice first what's happening and what you're tolerating with your culture and in your team members, but really look at yourself first, because that's what I was going to say is that if I've got an issue with energy on my team and one of my team members, it's my responsibility first to look at what am I projecting out there and how am I setting up the conditions where I might be creating that kind of dynamic in the company. So look at yourself first. That's your get out of jail free card, because usually there is something magical in there that if you shift it, you start to see a ripple effect with the people around you. If you're doing everything you possibly can and you're cleaning your energy, you're cleaning your intentions, you're showing up well, you're communicating cleanly, you've checked your 5 questions, then you want to start looking at, all right, what is the dynamics of the team around me? How can I set my team up better? What kind of agreements do we actually need to have? Mm-hmm. And some of the simplest things I've seen people do, Ryan, is just in a simple meeting, before we even get on screen, we have agreements for being on time. We have agreements for, no multitasking. We'll have agreements for, we're going to do a 20-minute meeting and it's going to rock. And that's it. We're going to have 20 minutes. Because I know that if I give us 40 minutes, we're going to take our 40. But if I give us 20, we're going to take our 20, Agreements around direct engagement is one of my favorite agreements. And this goes into the relational energy of that model. Direct engagement means if you and I have got something going on and we're irritated with each other, we have an agreement that you and I are going to talk to each other directly.
Find this out.
Right? As opposed to going and telling the rest of the team, oh, can you believe how horrible Anese is? And then they go, oh my God, she's the worst. Now we've got this total cancer in the company, So look at what's happening in your company, take care of your own energetic hygiene first, set up agreements with your team, ask people, what they need in order to show up better. And then ask everyone in your company to start taking accountability for their own energetic hygiene so that they bring clean energy. So there's a ton of ways.
It's interesting. You brought up, the agreements with others. I became aware of this thing that actually, I think my partner, Pat, he's me to listen and he's, another thing that I've taught him. And it's a good thing. I love how he articulates things that are intuitive. But once you label them, you're able to take action on them. And what Pat told me is whether you have those agreements that are intentional, like you just said, you still have social contracts that are unsaid. Like behaviors that you've established as okay with individuals. So you're doing it regardless. And so when Pat explained it to me, I was like, oh my God, this now you can do something because you've labeled it. Otherwise it was just this thing. Then of course you're going to go gossip around it.
Right. Well, what I love about that too is say you and I are on a team and you and I are doing some kind of a behavior that's social, we're doing some kind of behavior that's not productive. It's icky on the team, right? If we have agreements as a team and I go to start complaining to you to Pat can say to me, hey, Anese, do I have an agreement around direct engagement? Have you talked to Ryan about this directly? And he can do that in a way that's loving without making me wrong, without shaming me. Because by the way, if we're shaming each other on any of this, nothing's going to work. You can't learn from a state of shame. So Pat can say to me, hey, Anese, how can I be helpful to you in having a direct conversation with Ryan? So we clean up the energy of the team. Because even me going to Pat is breaking the contract.
Yeah,
but he can,
it's so true. And then, one thing, and I know we're going to be wrapping up here shortly, is how I've described this is that experience that you just mentioned is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And Brene Brown talks about getting in the arena and rumbling, which is just, doing these hard things. And it's not just uncomfortable. There's a true stomach ache. I mean, I remember so many times where I actually used back, a long time ago when I was in the middle of this turnaround part of the culture is like literally sweating and I was just not experienced enough in this. I'm terrified into my visceral internal reaction. So then you go, okay, if that's what I want to do the right thing, again, Pat says denial is the biggest powerful force in human nature. So the moment you become aware of this, you create cognitive dissonance, which is insanely painful because people now want to change. So how do you, is that why they use in the middle? Because there's this whole process. Because if you walk into a culture and everything's a disaster, there's a lot to be, a lot to be taken care of.
There's so much. So that's where, from my perspective, that's where I become such an advocate for our personal self-care. So that essential you that I talked about, which is basically you being so clear about your intentions. In your intentions, your intention has to be greater than your discomfort. Your commitment to your intention has to be greater to your desire to be comfortable. If you are super, super clean about your commitment to your intention, which is my intention is I want a healthy culture, I want a healthy relationship, I want a healthy this, I want a healthy that. If that is my intention and I am willing to be uncomfortable, it becomes a lot easier. So that's one piece.
That's
the other
huge.
piece is I talk about the bubble. I talk about bubbling up. And bubbling up is basically remembering, Ryan, that I've got my own energetic space. And if I am taking care of it, by the way, I'm taking my sleep, my food, my hydration, my exercise, my mindset, if I'm taking care of my energetic space, meditation, just because Rob Dubay, if you're listening, meditation. If I'm holding my energetic space and really, really clear about my intention, then I'm able to start choosing how I want to interact with those different things. And I'm not going to take on, this is why I said I'm able versus responsible. Totally. Because if I'm coming to my culture and I'm like responsible for it, I'm exhausted before I've even started. If I'm coming to my culture and the world, by the way, because there's a lot of stuff to be looking at right now, and I'm actually response-able, which means I'm able to respond to the best of my ability, and I'm going to trust that, I have a lot more space to start making a dent in each thing. And the thing is that it is contagious in the good way, which is the nature of the, contagious culture, contagious you. It is contagious because the more I do that and the more I model that, the more other people will start to catch that and start to do the same.
There's like a tipping point too, Anese, where like I noticed when we went from the toxic culture and we started making it was so painful. Like I actually described like it was like when a rock goes up and like the things kind of flutter underneath it that have been hiding for a long time. So when you get to this this pivotal point, the contagious nature of it started like other people started pruning those bad people out. It wasn't just me. So it's like, it was like, it had to start there and it rippled out. And it's amazing how it just starts to take hold.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I and back to just the naming it part, the rock, lifting the rock up made me think of this. I can remember going in to work with a group and I always make an intention, of service and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I do my 5 steps to intentional impact. And just because you do your 5 steps to intentional impact and you're clear about your intention does not mean you're going to get it, because you do not have control of the people around you. So I can remember going into a room and my intention was to assume good and that they really wanted to have me there. And I went in and actually the room was like a bunch of pit vipers. Like they didn't want me there at all. And what was happening was their leadership had actually, there was something huge going on in the company. And long story short, we ended up throwing out the entire session we were going to do. And we picked up the rock and said, okay, what's underneath this, you guys? And we picked it up and said, okay, what do we see? And for 3 hours with that leadership team and the group, we started to look at, all right, what are the things that are actually, that you're making, what are the assumptions you're making about the other leadership group? What are, and we started to name it. And naming it released so much of the toxins. Because once you start to name your assumptions, you start to realize they're totally assumptions and they're probably not fully real. And there's things that you can get curious about. And so the point being is just like that rock that you talk about picking up, that is one of the actions around cleaning up the energetic hygiene. It's just speak to it. Guys, how do we feel in our culture? Do we like it? Or we don't like it? Okay, what's getting in the way? Because underneath every single complaint is just an uncommunicated request.
Ooh, I like that. I'm going to star that. One kind of as a final note from my perspective is like, it's when it starts with you, which is, the point of your process. And then it's the hard work. But like when I went the polar opposite ends of the spectrum, Anese, is that if you've got the toxic culture, or maybe not even toxic, that's not the right word, because it's more just complacent, right?
It's
or
low
just,
vibe.
It's low vibe. And it's so much more difficult to work yourself out of your day-to-day job as a CEO, right? Where if like I watched that, where like you're tackling every problem, every customer, every supplier, all the banking, all that stuff, because everybody's doing the bare minimum versus you do this work that you're talking about, which is why I think it's so freaking important is when you go through that emotional, uncomfortable work to do this, the culture at the end is absolutely something where you can transition this culture. You can become an investor and sit on the board. You could do because the people are what hold it together. Like everybody, and this is where I think private equity firms and the industry, you got it way wrong. They all look in spreadsheets and I'm like, there's a people that make those numbers happen. Like, you have all these amazing skyrocketing numbers. I'm like, that's a person that's the VP of sales that hates the CEO. Like,
I love that.
Deal with that.
I love that. I love it so much that you're doing the work that you're doing and you're so connected to the people part of it. Like it literally makes my heart so happy. I'm so grateful for your work.
Oh, I appreciate it. That's very, very welcomed affirmation. It's but let's spin it back to you. So as we're wrapping up here, you've got like I've got printouts all over. You've got stuff on your website. You got 2 books. Where do we find you all over the place, and where should someone start?
Great. Go to anesecavanaugh.com. There's actually on the IEP method on the navigation, there's a thing that says new to IEP, start here. That's a good place to start. If you go to IEP.com and you just subscribe, that'll connect you with me. You're going to get like a bunch of stuff, and then you'll hear from me like once or twice a month. And then we've got, the books. There's another book called The Leader You Will Be, which is a poem that I wrote.
Oh, awesome.
You guys are welcome to. It's just fun. And then we've got some really cool things coming up in 2021. We're going to start doing leadership cohorts. So I'm going to be doing leadership resiliency cohorts over 6 weeks, and then team and culture cohorts, which will be a group of leaders who want to come together for about an hour and a half a week and really dig into this content and really, really learn it and integrate it so that it's basically 12 weeks total, if you do both of them together. So I'm super excited about that. So you'll find, if you get subscribed, then as soon as we open those up, you'll learn more about that. And then, I don't know, just look at the site. There's a ton there. I'm on social media, but I've been really quiet on social media lately, and it's
you and me both.
Lovely. It's been really nice.
I know, you and me both.
I've gotten so much done. It's been really interesting, but I am out there, and there's, yeah, like that. Thank you, Ryan.